Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? Tonight's episode is Who I Am is much more important than what I look like. We are all different. We are all sizes, shapes, and colors. Now, imagine having been born with a unique feature that causes you to stand out and often brings you rude, disrespectful, and hurtful treatment. But the story doesn't end there. Imagine succeeding under those circumstances. My next guest knows from firsthand experience what that is like. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Thanks, Jim.
Casey, other than by your name, what is the proper way to address people with your stature?
Oh, so there's medical terminology, which is a dwarfism. So people, could have a dwarfism, and there's many different kinds of dwarfism. And there's like a social terminology, which would be acceptable for us talking, which would be a little person. Okay. So, but there are some little people that would not accept that, would rather, accept the term dwarf or dwarfism.
Now, Casey, when we met, you said that there are over 850 types of little people. 250 types of little people, excuse me. And that often there are serious medical issues that accompany dwarfism. Could you elaborate for the audience a little bit on that, please?
Right. So the type that I have is quite rare. So much that there's not very much research on it. The type that is most common, if you were to see another little person, they would most likely have a medical condition called achondroplasia. And that is where their body is normal size, their torso, but their arms and legs are shorter. But it also comes with a number of skeletal problems. They could get a curved back, and a lot of the weight, does a number on the bones and the spine itself, and so they have to have corrective surgeries. So, and even with my type of short stature, there are corrective surgeries that are usually needed for most of us. So. Did
you yourself experience medical issues growing up?
Yes. So my type of dwarfism is called cartilage hair hypoplasia. So I still haven't learned to spell it correctly. But anyways, so mine is more of an immune dysfunction.
Okay.
So growing up, I had problems mostly with immune function. My blood, I'm missing parts of my immune system. So it also affects my skeletal system too. So the type of dwarfism, achondroplasia, where somebody just has, short arms or legs and a regular torso, my entire body is short.
Okay.
So.
Were your parents of average height?
So, yes. So the type of dwarfism I have, my parents are both of average height, and they are carriers of a gene that is recessive. So.
Both parents?
Both parents are average size, so they both have to be carriers in my case, and they would have a 1 in 4 chance of having, a little person, a person with cartilage hair hypoplasia. So, for example, I have a sister, and I'm the older one and she's the younger one, and they didn't know it at the time because not much information was known then, but my parents would have had a 1 in 4 chance of having another little person such as myself. There are other families where there are multiple children in the family that have cartilage hair hypoplasia, where the parents are average size. Where if you took achondroplasia, for example, and the two parents were average size, and they had a child with achondroplasia, the chances of them having another child with achondroplasia was, in the tens of thousands. So.
Your sister is average height?
She's average height, yep.
Wow. I don't think many people understand that whole recessive, at least I don't. I'm speaking for my own ignorance, that, that two parents had to be carrying the gene that gave them a 1 in 4 chance of producing a dwarf. Right?
Yep.
My goodness. Wow. Casey, where were you born?
I was born in New Haven, Connecticut.
New Haven?
Yeah, New Haven. And it's because my dwarfism is so rare, even at Yale, at that time, back in the 70s, they were not able to diagnose it. So, for example, I was born in 1976, but I wasn't diagnosed until 1983. So that poses a lot of problems because since they didn't know what I had, my immune system problems and all of those things, they didn't understand it. And I was diagnosed with several things before they were finally able to figure it out.
So at birth, they could not say that you were a dwarf. Is that what you're saying?
They knew that I was a little person and a
Yes.
dwarf. They just didn't know what type.
Oh, okay. Because of the 250 different types, they didn't
I don't believe they had that many at that time.
Okay.
Not that many were recognized.
Okay.
And so I know, my mother, they told her that I was a little person, and she didn't have any idea that could happen. I mean, today, there's tests and doctors can probably identify, whether a child might be a little person or not before the child's born in some cases. But in my case, they didn't know until I was actually born.
My goodness, yeah. Wow. Where did you go to high school, Casey?
I went to high school in New Britain.
Okay, so what was the high school mascot? I ask everybody.
We had the
that.
Hurricanes.
You had the Hurricanes?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, high school is a pretty brutal time for most of us. At least I remember some high school days I'd rather forget.
Yeah,
So,
there's days,
how
we
about
get
it?
those days.
Talk to us, tell our audience about being at high school and being who you are.
Well, in high school, I'm sure among everybody, you always have kids that are nice and want to be your friend, but you also have kids that are mean and, almost vicious and, bullies and all these other things. And, I've had my fair share of those. But, if you have your parents at home that are supportive, there's days when there's not really any issues. There's days you come home, all upset and your mom's there to support you and guide you through the day. You're going to build some resilience to some of these things. And, especially if you have a lot of friends that are there around to support you. You support yourself with some positive friends, and the bullies are kind of going to, be off to the side. So.
Did you find people come to your aid more willingly because of the physical difference when you had bullies on you?
Yeah, I think there were a few. There was definitely a lot of friends that I had in middle school and high school, where as long as you're with this group of people, no one's really going to come over and bother you or mess with you.
Yes.
For example, I got myself involved in sports, and so these are your teammates, and, you're with this group of people, and there's, banter between the team, but it's not like hardcore bullying against one person or me or somebody else. So.
Okay. And where did you go to college?
I went to college at Southern Connecticut State University.
Southern Connecticut State U.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And why did you choose that school, and what did you major in, and why?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I don't want to say I skated through high school, but I did good enough, to be able to get into college. And I wasn't the straight A student or straight B student that my parents probably would have liked, but they were just.
Was that because of a lack of effort or what?
Probably a combination. they were just happy that I was making it, and so my options were limited to state schools. So otherwise, I have to pay for it. And since they're paying, they decided, you get Southern or Central. I picked Southern. So.
Okay. All right. I want to back up a little bit. You played high school baseball, didn't you?
Yeah, I was involved in high school baseball from freshman to senior year.
Now, I understand you stole bases. Is that right?
I did. I stole a lot of bases. I don't think they were expecting it, and that was just one of my things.
So when the coach would put you in, and for what's the strike zone, Casey? What's going on with?
What strike zone? I don't know. How big is a baseball? So.
I love it. So they put you in, and you obviously would get a walk.
Yep,
and then you'd steal a base.
And then I'd start stealing bases. So, which was probably unexpected.
I would say so. The pitcher must have been a little unnerved.
A little bit. I mean, I had a couple of strikeouts, but that's okay.
All right, that's terrific. All right, so you're at college and you decide you're going to be a special ed teacher.
Right.
Okay, why did you pick that?
Okay, so my uncle was a teacher.
Okay.
Special education teacher, and he worked with people with Down syndrome and a number of other disabilities. And when I was a kid, I got to go and spend time in his classroom, and I also volunteered for Special Olympics. And when it came down for me to go to college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I knew I wanted to possibly go into teaching. And when you looked at that time when I went to college, when you looked at all the teaching degrees that they had, one of the only ones that you didn't have to double major for was special education. So I figured, it's less work and I get the degree faster, so we're going to go with that one. And I'm sure I would have loved no matter what I did. So I picked that one and I absolutely loved it. And, it's just something that I don't see myself not doing it. So.
Casey, there comes a time in most of our lives when we realize who we are. For me, it's what age did I recognize that I was African American, black in America, or for someone else it may be something different. What age did you come to the realization that, hey, wait a minute, I'm a dwarf and that's it? And what impact did that have on you?
Right. So when I was 5 years old, I had to have one of the corrective surgeries on my legs. They call them osteotomies. They pretty much break the bone and straighten it and set it, and it heals. And when I was there at Boston Children's Hospital having my surgery, my parents decided, maybe it was then, I'm not sure, that this is the time we're going to introduce him to another little person who went through the same experiences. And so they brought a young lady in who at the time was in college in Boston, and her name was Ruth Ricker. And I didn't really understand fully, I don't think, that I was a little person at that moment, because I asked my mom, she told me, that I thought it was another kid coming to play with me. So I didn't really grasp that concept yet, but after I had healed from those surgeries, my parents started attending these meetings. This is before there was social media and online and everything else.
Yes.
So they don't really, they wanted to get me to interact and socialize with other little people. And so they brought me to meetings, and these meetings were run by an organization called Little People of America. Mm-hmm. And so I started to see other people that were of short stature as well at these local meetings at people's houses. And when I would go back home and I would see my friends, and I started to make the connection that I was more like this group of people than the people that I was with on a daily basis. So, and from there, I just, continued to go to these meetings and hang out meet new friends, and my parents got to get the support from other parents who, at the time, that's their only support. You couldn't just go online on the computer and say, little person, dwarfism, cartilage or hypoplasia, achondroplasia. You couldn't just do that. So how did you get information? You went to these meetings and you talked to other parents, and you were supported and going through whatever it is I was going through, and my parents were going through. Other parents and other kids had already gone through it. So it was a great experience to be able to meet other people like myself, or for my parents to meet other parents that were going through the same thing.
Now, when we talked initially, you told me about lengthening.
Limb lengthening, yes.
Would you tell our audience what that is?
Right. So limb lengthening was originally developed for somebody whose one leg is just smaller than the other or bigger than the other, and that's what limb lengthening was originally developed for. But at some point, probably 20, 30, 20, 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, somebody came up with the idea that you could use limb lengthening to lengthen limbs of little people to make them taller. And so there are a number of difficulties doing that. It's a painful experience. And there's controversy within the community of little people on whether or not this is okay to do this, and do you feel okay with yourself, who you are? It's almost like a cosmetic thing. You don't get very much taller, maybe most 9 to 12 inches, and you're still having all of the problems that a little person would have. So if you're having achondroplasia, you would still have your spinal issues and your leg issues and all the other things that would go along with it. I know several people that have gone through limb lengthening and stopped halfway through the process, because it's a very painful experience. But being involved so much in LPA, they have actually a position statement on their website. And I think that LPA, Little People of America, would just like people to know what is involved and educate people before they make a decision to jump on the I'm going to be taller by limb lengthening bandwagon, because it takes years to go through this process.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So,
wow. Now, Casey, we talked about careers for little people when you were coming along.
Right.
And I remember you spoke very passionately with me about not wanting to be in entertainment. That was the major path for little people.
Correct.
Please elaborate on that.
So at the beginning of Little People of America, when the organization first started, it was founded by an actor, Billy Barty, and there were a number of other entertainers as well. But there were also a number of people who were not entertainers. And so it was interesting, that first meeting that they had. But as the organization grew, there's always going to be that aspect, but and there still is today, where people are just entertainers, and some people are great entertainers that are little people. Peter Dinklage.
Yes.
He's a great entertainer, and he's not focused so much on exploiting himself as a little person.
Yes.
And there are some little people that do that, but I think that there are people of different maybe races, or different, maybe women are going to exploit themselves. I think every person that's different, or everybody can find a way to exploit themselves, but that might not be the best way of going about becoming the best person you can possibly be.
You talked about Lee Kitchens.
Yeah, so Lee Kitchens was actually one of the founding members of Little People of America. He was at that first meeting. It was actually in Reno, Nevada. And aside from the entertainers that were, Billy Barty and those people that were involved, he was an engineer. So he had come from the organization from a different aspect. And he, is one of the people that I would say would be one of my role models. And I am happy that I got to meet and, be a part of his life for a number of years before he passed on. But he was one of the developers. He worked for IBM and was one of the developers of one of the first little handheld calculators, and also was on a team for what was it? He's on a team for the first personal computers that came out that were probably the size of half your desk here.
Yeah.
So he also was one of the presidents of Little People of America. And he was also the mayor of a small town in Texas.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Funny enough, it's called Ransom Canyon. So, yeah.
Wow. Casey, you spoke very eloquently with me during our initial interview about selecting realistic role models.
Right.
People that you could talk to every day and see, and not the celebs, the sports guys, and all that.
Right. So in my role as a special education teacher, I work with some at-risk kids, and you got to see some of them when you visited where I work. And I think one of the major issues that kids have nowadays is they see their role models as, somebody who they can't really touch and call. Like, if my role model was going to be Michael Jordan, and I'm having a bad day, I just can't call up Michael Jordan and say, hey, Mike, can you help me out? Here's my problem,
That's right.
And so, he might be the greatest role model in the world, but he's not going to be able to, help me.
Yeah.
So the kids that I work with, especially the at-risk ones, the role models that we really need to work on or with are the ones that are, in the community, people that are going to make a difference and be positive in their lives. And I think that really builds a resilience to, what's going on out there, on the street. If I'm making a decision about what I'm going to do next, whether it's good or bad, but I have this positive role model over here, maybe at the YMCA or the Boys and Girls Club or something like that. And I've got to think about, okay, this person down there at the YMCA who's my, positive role model here, how would he feel if he found out that I, was over here doing something on the street that I probably shouldn't have, whereas if my positive role model is Michael Jordan, he could probably care less what I'm doing on the street down here,
Gotcha. I do, yeah, I got you. Now, you have a very special connection with a television program called What Would You Do?
Right.
And for our viewing audience, it's a program that asks the question, what would you do? What they basically do is they stage various types of incidents in front of people to see how people will react and what they would do. Please tell our audience what you did and what was the result of it.
Right. So my wife and I watched this show for a number of years, and as I'm watching it, I'm always thinking, the wheels are always turning in your head, and what if I got a chance to to come up with something, and I always thought that every time. And then one day, on the show, they're like, we're asking for submissions. So of course, next thing you know, within 10 minutes, I've got an entire list of things that I'd like to submit. And I did, and they chose one of my ideas, which was to unwanted picture taking, because a lot of little people, or people with dwarfism, people with short stature, are subject to unwanted picture taking.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and so I wrote that in there, and they loved it, and we did a skit over in Nyack, New York, in a grocery store, and about people wanting to take pictures with a little person, and it was interesting to see how people responded, to that. And there was some bullying involved in that one, and some people were disturbed by what was going on, but that's every day, and I don't think I realized that other people didn't know that was going on. So.
Right, I think, yeah. You sent me a clip, and I saw the clip.
Yep.
And my wife and I watched it together, and she was astounded that people do that. Come up to you and take photos, not you personally, but come up to little people, take photos against your wishes, make comments like, oh, I didn't know the circus was in town, that kind of thing. It was just stunning to watch that and to watch people's reaction. It was quite amazing. And I'm really happy that you did that you sent that in, and that Mr. Quinones and his staff, John Quinones, I believe, that they actually did that.
Yeah.
So is that posted somewhere for people to go take a look at it?
It's on YouTube. I believe if you just search harassment of little people, you would find it.
So if they search for harassment of little people on YouTube, they'd find that?
I'm sure they would find it.
Okay, all right, terrific. I asked you before, if you could go back and be born again, would you be average height?
Absolutely not.
And why not?
I like the person who I am. I wouldn't be the person I am today. And there's a number of things that I have done to help and support people of short stature. And had I been born average size, I never would have been able to do any of those things. When I was younger, I got heavily involved in LPA, especially with the teen group. I developed an entire newsletter, workshops surrounding supporting just teenagers of little people who at the time didn't really have a voice in the little people community other than, we're all just hanging out together. well, okay, we're all just hanging out together. Now I gave us something to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or to get involved in.
Well, Casey, tell me something about being a business owner. I understand you own a business. Correct.
So one of the things I did at Southern Connecticut State University was of course, everybody needs, money, and I also liked cars my whole life.
Yes.
So I became a driving instructor at Southern Connecticut State University.
Yes.
That's one of the classes they had at the time. So I went through that, and I worked there for a number of years, and then I also worked for a number of smaller family-owned driving schools.
Yes.
And there was one of them. I still work there today, and I bought it probably about 5 years ago, and I've been running that ever since. So it's been a long time that I've been doing that.
Casey, let's close this out with a word to the wise from you. What would you say to our viewing audience, little people and people of regular stature? What would your message be?
Oh, my message to, It's interesting. Okay, so specifically to the people of average size, sometimes they just want to help, and maybe that's not the best thing. If I'm at the grocery store, I'm sure that, I'm down an aisle. If I really need help getting that can of soup at the top shelf, I'm definitely going to ask you,
okay.
But my guess is that maybe I figured out a way to do that.
Right.
So maybe, if somebody needs help, they're going to ask for it.
Thank you, Casey.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for tonight's show. My thanks to my guest, Casey Hubblebank, for sharing his story. Thank you for tuning in. Our stories are as different as each snowflake and are as beautiful and numerous as the stars. Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time, good night.